المحسنين كالمجرمين ما لكم كيف تحكمون أم لكم كتاب فيه تدرسون إن لكم فيه لما تخيرون أم لكم أيمان عليها بالغة إلى يوم القيامة إن لكم لما تحكمون سلهم أيهم بذلك زعيم أم لهم شركاء فليأتوا بشركائهم إن كانوا صادقين يوم يكشف عن ساق ويدعون إلى السجود فلا يستطيعون خاشعة أبصارهم ترهقهم ذلة وقد كانوا يدعون إلى السجود وهم سالمون سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين إن للمتقين مفازا حدائق وأعنابا وكواعب أترابا وكأسا دهاقا لا يسمعون فيها لغوا ولا كذابا جزاء من ربك عطاء حسابا رب السماوات والأرض وما بينهما الرحمن لا يملكون منه خطابا يوم يقول الملائكة صفا لا يتكلمون إلا من أذن له الرحمن وقال صوابا ذلك اليوم الحق فمن شاء اتخذ إلى ربه مآبا إنا أنذرناكم عذابا قريبا يوم ينظر المرء ما قدمت يداه ويقول الكافر يا ليتني كنت ترابا سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الحمد لله سمع الله لمن حمده الله أكبر الله أكبر
Okay. But I was checking. I checked to see the screen. I can see it. Yes. But when it comes to gas, there is nothing. So that means I have it. Oh, it always has. Yeah, very sure. So I don't know. Very sure to say that it's true. And then there is nothing like, you know, but you're not supposed to be taking that, right? Okay. I think that's okay if I'm watching the game, but checking the resolution. I would be. Or do you want me to just sit up? I want to see the picture on Facebook. So I always like to see. Yeah. They're not twins though, right? They're close together. Look at that. Okay. Now, here's checking. Okay, there's nothing to show that I have this. Okay, doesn't show it. Doesn't show anything. And I have your pencil as well, and I know that these are. Oh, I can take that pencil.
Jimmy? Oh, you wanted to do it? Whichever one. Whichever one. Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So before we begin, real quick, this brand new Ummah Community Clinic calendar has been released for 2014. Very beneficial calendar here. So this will go to the intelligent person who can remember without looking at their notes what are the four components of analogy, the English word and the Arabic word. Yeah, you get the whole calendar wrapped up brand new in the packaging. Cannot beat this. Right? No one. Okay, without looking, huh? Okay, English or Arabic or some combination. What are the four components of analogy? This poor calendar is crying right now. It needs a home. Nope, not ijtihad. Yes, four. Without looking. You didn't look, right? Okay, go. Okay, go.
It was the original case.
The original case. The illah, the effective cause. Okay, let's complete it. What is the third one? With which cause? The new cause. Okay, so there's a new cause. Good, that's three. We got three. One more thing that's missing. And the ruling. Okay, so we got one, and two. I only have one calendar, so which months would you like? Alhamdulillah. Wait, out of anyone who answered, who would like the calendar? Nobody wants a calendar? You have it? You have it, Auntie? Rihana Auntie, you have it? You have it too already? You have the calendar. Jamil, it's yours.
I have a smartphone.
You can give it as a gift to somebody. It's awesome pictures, man. Bismillah. There you go. There you go. Alright. Alhamdulillah. Now that we're in the mood to focus, Bismillah. Let's get started. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. So today we're going to be continuing on analogy. And remember I mentioned that analogy is probably one of the most, if I didn't mention it, letting you know, analogy is one of the most important subjects in Islamic law, in the field of usul al-fiqh that we're studying. And within analogy, and it's also one of the most difficult to understand properly. So if you're finding that it's a little bit tough, that's because it is tough. Okay, so don't get lost. It's a lot of philosophy involved, but it's a very important thing. So we talked already about the conditions of analogy. So now we're going to be talking about the illah, or the effective cause, and all the details regarding it. And this is the most important aspect of the analogy itself, okay, of the idea of analogy. So what is the effective cause? What is the illah? The effective cause is one of the most important aspects of the analogy, okay? So it's a characteristic, which we talked about before. It's a specific characteristic upon which the original ruling is built upon. So it's either known as the illah, or when it's built upon it, it's known as the manat. So these are two terms that get thrown around. And some of these terms are very technical terms. So if you ever hear a conversation between Muslim scholars talking about something in particular, thank you. If you hear like a conversation about scholars talking about something, and they start mentioning terms like the illah is this, and the manat is this, or something like that, and if you start following along, it's pretty impressive that you can keep up with what they're saying in the first, because they're going to use technical jargon. It's like imagine a surgeon or a doctor talking about some technical terms, and you follow along. It's like, wow, how did you know that? So this is interesting to know. If you know it, that's great. If not, at least you understand it. That's the most important part. You can memorize all the terms, but if you don't understand, then there's no point. Okay, so the illah, or what it's built upon, is the manat. So the effective cause is what the ruling is built upon. Now, what does that mean exactly? Okay, one thing you have to remember and understand is that all rules in Islamic law, all the laws in Islam, they're built for a specific purpose. And that purpose is either to bring some benefit to people, what's known as maslahah, or to avert some harm from people. And the harm is known as mafsada. So there's very two common terms that are thrown around all the time. Maslahah means that some benefit is being provided to people. Every law in Islam is providing some benefit to somebody, or it's preventing a harm away from somebody. And this is agreed upon by all scholars, all Muslim scholars. So let's take an example. You're allowed to skip the fasting in the month of Ramadan if you're traveling, right? If you're traveling, or let's say you're sick, and it's the month of Ramadan and you're supposed to be fasting. Every Muslim is supposed to be fasting, right? If you meet the conditions of, being, maturity and all of that stuff. But if you're traveling or if you're ill, you don't have to fast. You can make up that fast later on. So what is the reason behind that? What's the purpose behind it? It's because it's preventing you from experiencing excessive difficulty while you're fasting. Because traveling is a difficult thing. Being sick is a difficult thing. It makes your fast more difficult. So Allah has given us a concession and ease so that we don't have to go to that difficulty. So what's the purpose behind this ruling? The purpose behind the ruling is to prevent harm or to prevent mafsada from occurring in people's lives, an excess hardship, right? Take another example, preemption, right, which we covered in the previous class. Preemption or shufa'ah for the neighbor or for the partner does what? It prevents the person from being harmed when a property is going to be sold to somebody else, because that person has a vested interest or may be affected by the new neighbor or may be affected by the new partner when the part of the business or part of the property or house or whatever it is sold. So therefore they have this option of preemption to buy the property first. So that's something that has been given in Islamic law, and the reason for that is because they might be potentially harmed by the sale of this property. So it's preventing mafsada, it's preventing a harm from accruing on somebody else. Another example is retaliation, so qisas, for example. So retaliation in injuries or retaliation in murder does what? It actually helps to protect life, right? Because if you're being tough on criminals, right, who are going and committing murder, that punishment actually will prevent them, or at least it's something to avert them from going and doing the same thing again. If you're super soft on crime and you say, oh, we'll give you a week in jail or something like that, what's going to happen? Yeah, you know, if you're thinking about murdering someone, you say, just a week, I can handle that. This guy deserves to die, and you go and kill the person. So the reason is protecting life by helping people by being tough on crime. Cutting the hand of the thief. Right, when we covered that in the previous class as well, the conditions and the details and all of that. Same thing, what does it do? What is its purpose? Right? You say, well, it's inflicting harm. It's inflicting mafsada, right, on the guy who stole. But what is it doing for the society? It's providing a benefit for the society to protect people's property from getting stolen because there's no penalty or no real penalty on crime. So all of these things, they have either some type of benefit in them, or they prevent some type of harm or difficulty on other people. So this is something that we have to realize. It's a gift from Allah. It's a huge gift from Allah, because all of these rules that we have in Islam, if all of them have some benefit or avert some kind of harm, it means it's for whose benefit? For our benefit, right? Now Allah didn't have to do that. He didn't have to do it for our benefit. Instead, what He could have said is that, you know what, I'm going to make rules just to test you, and there's no benefit for you, and there's no underlying purpose. It's just a straight up test, right? So, for example, when you're praying, Allah could have said, you know what, you have to stand on one foot while you're praying. Right? That would be very annoying, right? It would be very difficult. Your test, you know, maybe it can help you in your balance or something like that. You know, but outside of that, it's not going to be that beneficial for you. Right? There's no point in standing on one foot in per se. We get to stand on both feet. Allah could have asked you to, you know, do a handstand while you're praying, just to see if you're dedicated enough to Allah, if you're going to be obedient to Allah. But there's no purpose in, you know, learning, I don't know, headstand or something like that while you're praying. There's no real purpose behind that. So therefore, there's no benefit for you behind that. So Allah didn't do that. So instead, every single rule that Allah has made made it for our benefit, and it serves as a test at the same time. So it does both. So when we're let's say we're praying, there's a benefit for us, and it's also a test for us, to see whether we're going to obey Allah. When we're fasting, there's a benefit for us, and it also serves as a test for us to see if we're going to be worshipping Allah in that fashion. So this is the amazing thing about every single law in Islam has been made according to this criteria. Okay, now this is a huge thing, because many people, they think, well, why do I have to do all this, or why is there so many rules or something? If we realize, first of all, the benefit is for ourselves, then we wouldn't be complaining. A lot of people, they think about that about like other rules. When people complain, when seatbelts were first mandated in California, I remember everyone was complaining, man. I hate this seatbelt. It's so uncomfortable, and I don't like it, and I don't enjoy it, and I don't even want to wear it, and all of that. But in the end, whether or not you agree with the rule, it is for your own benefit. Because if you get in a car accident, you're going to fly right out the windshield. So it's for your benefit, right? If you say, oh, it's so annoying when the law was passed that we can't talk on our phones, and then the law was passed, we can't text message. It's so annoying, I like to text message, I like to talk on the phone, I have so many important calls to make. True, right? But at the same time, for the benefit of society, that you're not getting in a random car accident because people are on their phone and they're getting into accidents here and they're texting and they're getting accidents here and flying off of bridges and stuff. It's for your own benefit. Right? So the same thing with these laws. Now I'm not saying all American laws are for our benefit. But that's definitely not the case. But in Islam, they are for our benefit. Right? Whether we see them or we don't see them, this is a huge blessing from Allah. And it serves as a test of obedience at the same time. So once we realize that, then we realize that, look, there is an underlying wisdom, or what's called hikmah, an underlying wisdom behind each and every single rule in Islam. But here's the catch. The catch is that the rule itself is never built upon the underlying wisdom. So the rule is never built upon the hikmah or the wisdom. Even though it's there, it's not built upon it. So what does that mean? Instead, it's built upon the illah, or the effective cause. So that means that there's a difference between the wisdom of something and the effective cause of something. And I'm telling you, this is one of the most important, things. I find this to be one of the most interesting and important things, because too many people, and I'm talking about Muslims as well, are complaining about, I don't see the wisdom in this, and I don't see the wisdom in that. I'm not going to do it because I don't think that there's any point in this. Or you know what, they argue contrary. Oh, this rule doesn't make sense, and this rule doesn't make sense, and this rule doesn't make sense. I think if we did this, it would make more sense. So this is a very important principle to understand. So rules are not built upon the wisdom, but they're built upon the effective cause. So there's a difference between the two. So let me give you an example to make it very clear so that you understand it. So let's take traffic lights on the streets, traffic signals, right? Everyone knows them: red light, yellow light, green light. So now the rule is that it's an obligation. It's fard, right? To stop at a red light or at a stop sign. You have to stop, right? Everyone has to stop at the stop sign or at the red light. That's a requirement, that's mandatory across the board. Now the thing is, what's the wisdom behind it? What's the wisdom behind stopping at a red light? Prevent accidents, organizing traffic, right? Controlling the congestion of traffic and everything. And what else? It could be danger, exactly. So there's danger, and it helps to, balance traffic across the board. So that's the underlying wisdom. But the effective cause of the red light is the light itself. Why? Because if somebody stops at the red light and then they look around and say, hey, there's nobody here. And the underlying wisdom is to balance traffic, which there is no traffic. So if I go, it's going to be balanced. And there's no danger, right? I don't see anyone from here. I don't see anyone from here. So I'm going to break the red light. So if you ever try that, you'll see what happens to you, especially if they have the signal there. Right? I mean, you're not going to do that. You know that it's illegal, and you know that if the cop stops you, you can't tell the cop, well, you know what I did? I understood that the hikmah and the wisdom behind the ruling was these two things, and they did not exist. Therefore, it was okay if I broke the light. And the cop will say, I'm very glad, you studied at the College of Islamic Studies. I here's a ticket for you because you didn't continue the rest of the course, or something, whatever it is, right? So the thing is, you have to understand that rules, even rules that we use in society, are not built upon the wisdom. They're built upon certain effective causes. And the reason why that is because people could go and take the law into their own hands and say, you know what? I understand the wisdom behind this, and the wisdom is not being affected by my sitting here at a red light when there's no other cars going. So I'm going to go ahead and break it. Right? Now, it could be that if the person goes and breaks the light, and there's really no cars, he might just go through perfectly fine, and there was nothing wrong with it. And the cop didn't get him, and there was no camera light or whatever, and no big deal. It's not the end of the world, right? But if he decided, he looks around, all of a sudden, I'm just going to go, there's nobody there, and all of a sudden, boom, another car comes and hits him. Then what? You say, well, that's what the light was for. The light was for, this may be on the other side of the road, the other lane, may be 65 miles an hour. It may be 70 mile an hour street. You don't know. You can't see it from where you are. And you don't know if a person is turning around the corner and going or whatever it is. So this light has a purpose, and the light itself is the effective cause, but it has a wisdom behind it. But you cannot make the ruling based on the wisdom. The ruling applies when the red light is there, right? So that's the way generally things work. So people can't, go and take the law into their own hands, and Islamic law has the exact same thing. Now look, these are general exceptions. So someone makes a general exception for themselves, there's no cars, it's okay. But there are special exceptions. And the special exception is where somebody absolutely needs to run the red light because they're in a special circumstance. So who's allowed to run a red light? Ambulance, police, who else? Fire trucks, right? So there are special exceptions. The same thing in Islamic law, there are special cases, like if you're dying of hunger or something like that, there are special cases where you're exempted. But general exceptions, when people say, well, I think my circumstance, or I think my particular situation is not fulfilling the wisdom, therefore I'm going to go ahead and do that. So we have to be very cautious about this, because Islam is the exact same way. So, let's take an example from Islam. So a person is traveling, they're allowed to shorten their prayers, right? So in Fajr, a 2-unit prayer can become 1 unit, right? One guy's like, yeah, no. We mentioned that last week. No, only 4-unit prayers can go down to 2 units, right? How about Maghrib? Can it become 1.5? No. Okay. So you're allowed to shorten your prayers to 2 units, the 4-unit ones. Now, what's the underlying wisdom? Prevent hardship. Right? Very simple, very clear, it's not difficult to understand. But let's say there's another guy. He just got fired from work. And he just got the results back from his law school exam, which he was trying to, get into law school. And he failed. Right? This guy is stressed out like crazy. And he just got a message from his wife, you know what? I heard that you failed the exam, I'm divorcing you. Now imagine this guy is, this guy's in a really bad state right now, right? Very, very difficult state. And he says, you know what? And my friend, he just went on a trip. And he's just driving from here to San Francisco. And he's going to be shortening his prayers from 4 to 2. I'm more deserving in this case. I'm more stressed out than him. He drives a Rolls Royce. He's literally in luxury and comfort. It doesn't even bounce or anything. Just sitting there going. So this is not fair. I should be the one who's shortening the prayer. So I'm going to take my 4-unit prayer, I'm going to shorten them because I'm stressed out. Can he do that? Can't do that. Why? Because the rule is built on the effective cause, and the effective cause is what? Traveling. And the wisdom behind it is preventing difficulty. So even though he's experiencing difficulty, he cannot go and take it into his own hand and say, this is my circumstance, this is my condition. Even though it may be the case that yes, it is more difficult in this case for him than his other friend who is traveling. But why is he not allowed to do it? Because if everyone was given the opportunity to say, you know what, my situation is very difficult, then you know what, I know 95% of college students would say, you know what, there's no way I could be forced to pray Fajr in the morning because we sleep at 3 a.m. and it's just so difficult. I mean, if that guy's allowed to skip the prayer, if a woman who's menstruating is allowed to skip her prayer, come on, man. You know how hard it is to wake up for Fajr? I should be allowed to skip my prayer as well. Analogy. But this is known as what type of analogy? What kind? No, but we discussed it. We discussed the term. Forgot? Analogy with a discrepancy. Qiyas ma'al fariq. Very important term to remember. So people make analogies all the time. You got to be careful. So, anyways, so this guy who is stressed out or whatever, he cannot do that because the effective cause is traveling, and it's not hardship. Even though the wisdom is hardship, the effective cause is traveling. Okay. Now, usually in most circumstances, the effective cause will reflect the wisdom in the ruling in most people's circumstances. So most people who travel will experience a type of difficulty. Most people who are not traveling, or they're not ill, or they're not whatever else, they're not going to experience generally the same type of difficulty when they're traveling. So it usually will reflect the wisdom behind the ruling. But if it doesn't, in some particular circumstance or particular person's case, the law will still apply. So let's take an example of schools, right? In school, students pass the exam by getting this grade, right? In CIS, in order for you to pass, what is the percentage you need to pass the class? 70%, right? I actually wanted to make it 80, but we decided to go with 70 for now. Inshallah, in a year or two we'll change it up to 80. Because this is Islamic knowledge. This is not, it's a big responsibility for people. So anyways, there's a cutoff point. Now, if somebody passes the exams, right? Why do you give them exams in the first place? Right? There's a reason and there's a purpose, because the people who pass the exams, it's pretty much understood that they're supposed to know what? They're supposed to have some competence in the subject that they study, right? And if they fail the exam, it means that they did not really learn, they did not really understand. But will there be scenarios where somebody fails and actually learned a lot, and somebody passed and they kind of guessed, or they kind of just made their way through or whatever, but they didn't really learn? There will be scenarios like that. But can we say that, you know what, in that case, we're going to go ahead and give this person the degree, and this person who passed, because you guessed sometimes, we could tell, where even though you passed, we're going to fail you anyways. Can't do that, right? So the effective cause of getting a certificate or a degree or passing a class is what? It's the grade. It's the cutoff limit of the grade. But the underlying wisdom behind it, the hikmah behind it is what? To show that you have understood and you learned and you actually know something. So that's the same thing. So this applies in our daily life in addition to Islamic law. So it's not like this is just only here. This is the way human beings normally think about things, the way we make rules, the way we talk, all of these things. So this is all built into Islamic law. So let's move on to the conditions of the effective cause. So the illah itself, the effective cause, has certain conditions, right? So now, if you want to understand why exactly are the rules built on the effective cause rather than the wisdom, what is the exact detailed reasoning behind it? So we've seen the difference between the two. Now if you say, well why? Why can it sometimes be built on the wisdom or something like that? Why is there have to be this differentiation? When you study the conditions that an effective cause must have, it begins to just, everything clicks into place. So let's look at condition number one. Well, first the conditions. The thing is, sometimes people will identify effective causes incorrectly. And that's very dangerous. So you can go and you can, you can take wine, and we'll look at this example again. If you say wine is prohibited, well, the reason why it's prohibited is just it smells so bad, you know. That must be the reason why you're not allowed to drink it. I mean, that cannot be the effective cause, right? Because if it was, that's not a right effective cause. We'll talk about why, right? But that's an incorrect identification of an effective cause. But you hear it sometimes. You hear it from Muslims. It just stinks and it smells so bad, and you know it gets on your clothing and it messes up your clothing. That must be the reason why Allah has forbidden it. And you hear that. But that's not the underlying reason. That may be perhaps a part of a wisdom or something. But if vinegar gets on your clothing, then also it may smell bad. Or ammonia gets on your clothing. You don't drink ammonia, by the way. But I mean, if it gets on your clothing, it could be also unfortunate. But anyways, so if you incorrectly identify the effective cause, there's going to be a problem if you don't understand the conditions. So where do these conditions come from? They just popped out of nowhere. There's a way that these conditions came about. So the scholars, they studied all of the effective causes, the illahs, that were specifically stated in the Quran and the Sunnah. So whenever Allah told us this is the effective cause, they looked at all of those, they studied them, and they used their mind, they reason a little bit, and they figured out, they said, you know what? This is kind of what we're getting from what Allah is talking about. So they used the process of induction. So there are two types of reasoning. There's inductive reasoning and there's deductive reasoning. Does anyone know the difference between the two? You know the difference? You know, okay, you know, but it's hard to explain. Deductive reasoning is like when you were in elementary school and they taught you the scientific method. And they're telling you that, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to form a hypothesis, which is a general rule, right? Like, for example, you come up with a hypothesis. Well, anytime you put one of your baby teeth into a little vial full of Coca-Cola and you leave it there for a month, your tooth will completely decay over time. That's a hypothesis, and it's a general rule. And then what you do is you take this general rule and then you start testing it and you look at specific cases to see if the general rule works. So it's going from the general to the particular. That's a type of proof. That's deductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning is the exact opposite. You go from something specific, and by looking at something specific, you try to extract a general rule. Okay, so that's inductive reasoning. This is exactly what happened here. So they looked at certain, wherever Allah or His Messenger mentioned certain effective causes. This is the reason why this, and this is the reason why this. Right? You look at all of those, and you say, well, what pattern are we seeing? And then by looking at those patterns, you make these general rules. So from specific to general. Okay? That's not going to be on the exam. That's just a side note. Okay? Inductive and deductive reasoning. So anyways, so they induced the following conditions. Condition number 1. The illah, or the effective cause, must be apparent, which is known as zahir. It must be perceivable. Okay? It has to be something that you can actually see. It can't be something that's hidden. Right? So what does that mean? So the underlying wisdom of a ruling cannot be perceived by the senses. You cannot actually see the details of the actual underlying wisdom. So for example, the traffic signal scenario. The danger at the red light, sometimes you can see it when other cars are moving by, sometimes you cannot see it. So danger as a concept is the wisdom to prevent the danger. But danger is not something that's clearly apparent. Sometimes you might see a danger, sometimes a danger will come from behind and you can't see it. So that's why danger, the idea of something is dangerous, can never be the effective cause of a ruling, and therefore you cannot apply analogy. Otherwise everything is dangerous, Like one time, I think we gave an example of, in one of the classes, maybe here, if you're praying in an airport, and somebody starts looking at you, so taking a picture of you or something like that, right? We saw that, right, in one of the classes. So, what if you're praying in an airport, all of a sudden somebody, every time, there are many people who are scared to pray in public places. And you see, you're praying, and all of a sudden someone says, no, we're not going to pray. So why? Well, somebody looks at you. I say, then what? And maybe they're gonna pull a knife on you. Maybe they're gonna shoot you because you're praying or something like that. Now, you say, okay, there's a danger, right? So you say, well, because of the danger, I'm not able to pray my prayers right now, so I'm going to have to skip the prayer completely. Danger is not, I mean, it could be there, it could not be there. It's so difficult to ascertain because it's not apparent. So that's why danger cannot be an effective cause, because it's not zahir, it's not apparent. So that's why the red light scenario works. So the red light itself becomes the effective cause, because danger is not something that's apparent, but the red light is apparent. You can see it clearly. You're looking at it. When it's not red, it's another color, you can go. When it's red, you stop. Very simple. You just look at it and it's clear. It's there in front of you. Right? So it signifies, but the red light signifies that a danger is present or can be present. Right? So you're not allowed to be going. So that's the way it works. So the same, but now let's look at some of the other wisdoms. Or let's look at some of the other qualities. So for example, intellectual maturity. Intellectual maturity. Right? It's something that, I mean, can you look at someone and tell that they're mature? That they're an adult now? Not adult in the American, 18-year-old or 16-year-old, 21-year-old sense. In the sense that, okay, you look at one person who's 14, another person who's 14, one of them is really like in an adult stage, another one is still a child. Can you tell the exact difference between that? You can't, right? It's very difficult. Right? Sometimes I look at 35-year-olds and they're playing PlayStation all day and stuff, and I wonder sometimes as well. It's not apparent. You can't tell if a person is really reached the age of maturity or intellectual maturity or not. It's hard to tell. So because it's not apparent, intellectual maturity is not apparent. Intention. Right? Somebody said, well, I didn't intend that. You cannot tell somebody's intention, so it's not apparent. Hardship is not apparent. I mean, you can see someone who's, feeling, looking like they're feeling difficult, but you can't really measure that, the hardship that they're facing. So it's not apparent. And someone may face hardship, but they're keeping it to themselves. You can't tell. And consent, for example. When someone is consenting to something, and they're saying openly, you know what, I don't mind. And in reality, they hate it. It looks like consent, it may not be consent. Or if they say, yeah, I agree, but in reality, in the heart that, or opposite, they say, no, I don't want it, but in reality, they actually are consenting. Yeah, go ahead, take it. Consent, these are all things which are not apparent. You can't tell because they're inside of a person. You cannot tell these things. But qualities which are apparent, like being in a state of intoxication, you can tell that a person is intoxicated. One person may feel like euphoria, for example. Euphoria is apparent or not apparent? Euphoria is apparent? No. Not necessarily. If someone could just be sitting there meditating in a state of euphoria. Euphoria means really happy, a state of happiness. Sometimes, but we're talking about, is it clear? Like, is it an apparent state normally or not? Normally it's not. You could be sitting there extremely happy, right? And you're just so ecstatic, and you may have a straight face. We can't tell, right? And vice versa. So euphoria is not an apparent state, but intoxication is something that you can clearly define. It's an apparent state. You can define it. It's seeable for the most part, so it's clear. So intoxication can be an effective cause because it's apparent. Illness, apparent or not apparent? No, I know it depends on the illness, but generally, yes, it's measurable. It's generally considered to be something that's apparent. Traveling, you can tell someone is traveling. If you find their location, right, you can tell that they're traveling. Right, outside of their intention for traveling, you can tell you're not near your residence. You're in the middle of the road somewhere. You're traveling. You're a far distance away from home. So these are all apparent things. So because the fact that they're apparent, the effective cause can be intoxication, illness, or travel. But it cannot be maturity, it cannot be intention, it cannot be hardship, it cannot be consent, because these are concealed, hidden things you generally cannot figure out in detail. Therefore, one can be the effective cause and the other one is the wisdom. So let's look at some detailed examples now. Intellectual maturity, which we're talking about now. Intellectual maturity distinguishes a person who's a minor from a person who's an adult. Right? Someone who's minor or adult. Now why do you need to know this in Islamic law? Because a minor is not obligated to pray. A minor is not obligated to fast. Minor is not If a minor commits murder or commits a crime or something, they're not going to be held accountable the same way as a mature person will be held accountable, right? So how do you determine what intellectual maturity is? If you can't really tell, there's two 14-year-olds in front of you. How do you determine, if you tried to figure out and say, well, this guy committed a crime, this guy committed a crime. One of them we're going to try like an adult, and one of them we're going to try like a kid. Because, his neighbor said he's very childish, and the other one said, no, this other 14, this guy's a genius, man. He can be a computer programmer, he works for Google, he does this, he does that. This one we got to punish, this one, he's a little kid playing with little, I don't know, G.I. Joes or something like that. He's not really up there. How can you tell? So you have to have an illah, which is an effective cause, which is clear. So, the intellectual maturity is a hidden characteristic. So in Islamic law, what they did was, or what Allah did was, is that there are three factors which are apparent, which will determine whether a person has reached the age of maturity or not. And we study this in Islamic law 1. Without looking at your paper, who can tell me from that class what those three factors are? Different for males and females. Repeat the question? The question, she was in a state of euphoria. So the question was, what are the three apparent factors to determine when a person reaches the age of maturity? Number 1, menstruation for a woman. Number 2, age, yes. And number 3, wet dream, exactly. So these are the three things that can determine whether a person is there. Now why these three things? Because all three are apparent. You can tell. I mean, if the person is looking at himself, he can tell. If you look at yourself, you say, oh, I've reached, all of a sudden, yesterday I was not intellectually mature, but today I am. You can't figure that out exactly, but you can see these things, right? So that's why these things have been made the effective cause of the ruling that you have to start praying now. It's obligation for you, right? You have to start wearing hijab now. You have to start fasting now. All of these other things. So all of these things are important. Example number 1. Example number 2. When you have transfer of property through a sale, when you're selling something to somebody else, it can only happen when there's mutual consent between the buyer and the seller. Otherwise, that's called what? If there's no mutual consent? It's theft, right? It's theft. So you don't agree that I'm going to take your laptop right now, and I take your laptop. I just transferred it to myself. That's theft. Right? So that's not. So you have to have mutual consent. But mutual consent is not something that's always apparent, right? It's not something that's always clearly apparent. So what do you do in that case? You make the effective cause something which represents consent. Now what represents consent? Well, in Islamic law, generally what they said was an offer and an acceptance. An offer on the part of the seller and an acceptance on the part of the buyer. Now we're talking about like verbal offer, verbal acceptance. Now you can apply that to written offer and written acceptance. You can apply that to, you click buy now, you check out of your cart and you say process the transaction. That click indicates your consent, right? But you can't say the consent itself, right? The consent itself cannot be that, because otherwise you would say, well, you know what? You go to the bank, you open up a bank account, you sign all the documentation and everything. Or let's say you're installing software, right? Everyone does this. They install software and it says, please read the end user license agreement. And then there's like 20 pages, and no one's going to read that. And it makes you scroll down real quick. No one reads it and say, click here to agree. And you agree. And if you don't agree, you can't use the program. So everyone goes and clicks and agrees. Then all of a sudden you go forward and you say, you know what? You go and you do something against the policy of this company. And then they say, oh, you're in trouble now because you signed that agreement. And you say, no, I didn't consent to that agreement. I clicked, because I had to, but I did not consent to that agreement. You can't say that. You cannot say that. You're held accountable. Why? Because you clicked, and that click is the effective cause of your acceptance. Now you're going to be held accountable. Like all of you, you signed the document that you had read, the student guide of CIS, right? So if I get an email saying, you know what, it's the 4th week of class now, I found out the class is really, really hard, could I drop and just get a refund, please? Say, go read the student book. You agreed that you signed the book. If in the 8th week of class, all of a sudden say, I really tried hard, I've been really trying my best, I've been doing some of the exams, but I'm so busy now, it's just tough for me, and I found that the class was harder than I thought. Can I change my, status to, what do you call it, what's it called? Auditing, yeah. Can I change my status to auditing student? He said, no, read the guidebook. At this point, I forgot what it was, whatever week it is. If in the 9th week, you're not allowed to change to auditing. So yes, you're going to get an F. He said, I didn't do any of the exams and stuff. Well, you signed the book, but I didn't know. No. You signed, which means you were supposed to read, you agreed that you had read, or you agreed that you're going to be held accountable for not reading. So now, you get an F. Alright? Alhamdulillah, this is the first quarter that we started this. So far, I've not gotten any of those requests. But it wouldn't surprise me in the 9th week, because we used to get this all the time. 9th week, 10th week. Like one day before the final exam. Can I change to auditing? Are you kidding me? Change to auditing now? You can't just change to auditing like that. Right? It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way in any other university. So, because you clicked, or you typed your name or something like that, you clicked OK, that means that you signed. So you say, well, but my consent was not really in my heart. Didn't the Prophet say deeds are based on their intentions? Right? My intention was that I'm not going to abide by this thing. It's not going to work. Effective cause was you clicked and that's it. So, that's another example. Let's take a third example. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught that a murderer will not receive inheritance from his victim. So if you kill one of your family members and you are supposed to be inheriting from them, you don't get inheritance. We covered that in the previous class. So now, what's the wisdom behind that? What could possibly be the wisdom behind that? Someone's going to kill you for your money. Right? One of your, this happens. This actually happens. So now, but they were going to get the money anyways. So why did they kill him then? Get it sooner, exactly. They're trying to speed up the process. I need the money now. I want to buy the nice car and the nice house now. I don't want to wait till you die. I want the money now. So now, the wisdom is to prevent people from trying to speed up the inheritance process unnaturally by killing a person. Right? So now, that's the underlying wisdom. Right? But let's say the person murdered their own family member not for money. They murdered them because they just simply hated their guts, for example, which is a really bad thing. But I just hate that person. They lied to me. So you go and you kill that person. Say, look, this person did not do it for the money, right? So now can he inherit? No, right? Let's say he killed out of jealousy, not for money, just jealousy. Still no. Still no. Your brother, right? Your brother goes and marries the girl that you wanted to marry. Then you kill him for that reason. Can you inherit from him? No. You're excluded anyways, right? Let's say you kill your own family member out of a justice. Your family member happens to be the pharaoh, right? And he's oppressing people, and he's a mobster, he's a gangster, right? He's like the Al Capone or something, and no one can get to him. The police cannot get to him. So you go and you become, Batman, and you take the law into your own hands, and you go and I'm going to take care of this guy on my own. And you go and you take care of him. Out of justice, you killed him. Can you inherit from him? No. Why? Because the effective cause is the murder itself. And what could be the wisdom behind making the effective cause murder? Because you may claim that you did it out of justice, but no one can tell, it's not apparent. You may claim that you did it out of hatred or jealousy, but no one can tell, it's not apparent. Even though technically, from a purely technical perspective, if that was your intention, you may not necessarily have to be barred from inheriting, but you're still barred anyways, because we can't tell, and you committed murder on top of that. But I mean, you see the point. So, these are examples of how the effective cause has to be what? Apparent. Zahir. Okay? Number 2, the effective cause has to be constant. What's called mundabit. Okay, constant, or something that is tied down, basically, something that is. That's pretty much constant is a good translation. So What does that mean? It means that the illah, or the effective cause, must be able to apply to all people, regardless of their circumstances, regardless of their characteristics. So it cannot be, oh, this is applicable to African American people only, or this is applicable to Arabs only, or this is applicable to, people who are in their 30s only. It has to be something which is going to be across the board, so it's constant, it can apply to everybody. So this is close to being zahir, but it's a little bit different, close to being apparent, but different. Let's take the school example that I just gave about degrees, right? Degrees are awarded by the exams, right? Because the examination and the grades are something constant. You can constantly give, a degree or passing the class to anyone, regardless of who they are, regardless of their background, regardless of where they live. If you got the grade, you get the certificate. If you don't have the grade, you don't get the certificate. Because the underlying wisdom was that, the person is supposed to be learning, or has individual merit, or, someone really benefited from the class. So somebody passed, but they didn't benefit. Somebody failed, but they really benefited. So we're going to give you an award based upon benefiting from the class. It's not something that's apparent. So you can't, it's not only is it not apparent, it's not a constant. Right? It's not mundabit, because it can't apply to all people across the board. So there's a little bit difference between this and the previous one. Therefore, you have to make sure that the effective cause is constant. So let's take an example. The first example is someone who is traveling, or somebody who is ill, is allowed to skip fasting and they can make it up later. Right? Okay, now the underlying reason behind this is to prevent what? Hardship. Okay? Now, the quality of hardship is relative. It differs based on your age, differs based on your culture. They say like American kids are very spoiled and all of that. Everything is a hardship for them. Right? So it's things like, it depends on your culture. And you go to like India, or you go to Africa, and you tell, some of the, 16-year-olds or something, you pick this up and you work in the field for, 12 hours in the hot sun. Like, yeah, that wasn't too bad. And then you take like an American worker, and they work like 3 hours, and they take like 7 lunch breaks or something, and then they start protesting or something like that, Some of them are legitimate protests, right? But there's a difference between work ethic, right? If you take Japanese, German work ethic, and you take some other random country where their like scores are ridiculously low, you see a difference in work ethic. And one of them will complain, oh, you want me to do that too? What are you, a slave driver? And you're like, you didn't even work actual 1 hour productivity in your day. There are people, there's a study that was done. In an average 8-hour workday, how much productivity is there? So some countries ranked on the top, Japan and Germany in particular, 7.5 hours of productivity in an 8-hour workday. Some countries were below an hour. They were like in the 30-minute range of actual productivity in an 8-hour workday. Huh? Not just government workers. Usually they happen to be government workers, but they're government workers in a particular country. So, very problematic. So the culture, depends on what the difficulty is, right? And it's very generational as well, right? So otherwise, one of the most common complaints you're going to hear, Fajr is just too difficult. You want me to come for Fajr in the masjid? It's just too cold. It's just too cold in the morning. I just can't come. In the winter time, I just can't do it. So you can't do it, man. There's a 60-year-old man, an 80-year-old woman one time was coming for Fajr. She can do it, but you can't do it. She's coming on a walker, and you can't. She can do it, but you can't do it. You're a young 18-year-old, and you can't do it. So difficulty is very relative. It's not a constant. So if it's not a constant, it cannot serve as the effective cause, and that's why in this case, travel is the effective cause. Illness is the effective cause, because the other thing will be relative. So even if a circumstance arises where, look, someone's traveling, like I said, minimal difficulty. Driving in the car, very easy for me. I enjoy airplanes. You have your own helicopter, whatever it is. You say, I'm feeling minimal difficulty. Someone else is, having a difficult time in their life or whatever. They're not allowed to do this concession because the effective cause is not there. Because there has to be a constant that's specific. So you don't keep taking things into your own hands. Like I said, otherwise I guarantee you everyone will justify to themselves that Fajr is too difficult. Everyone will justify to themselves, Fajr is just too difficult. But it's not. It's not if you, kind of take it into consideration. Anyways, number 2, example number 2. And by the way, when it comes to Southern California, those people who are live streaming, if you go to, you go to Scotland, you go to these regions, they pray Fajr at like 2 a.m. And they pray Isha, even the East Coast, but they pray Isha at like 11 p.m. And everyone does it. The 20-year-olds do it, the 40-year-olds do it, and the 60-year-olds do it. Even though there might be a concession when it's really extreme circumstance, but they all do it. And they all survived, right? And there's not that much complaint about it. And here people just complain and we have it actually very easy. Anyways, number 2, preemption. So we talked about preemption. The right of the neighbor, the right of the partner. Now the underlying reason is to prevent what? Harm. Because of the transaction, sale of the property, whatever. Now the effective cause has to be constant. So what is the effective cause of the preemption? What is the constant? Not the selling part. But see, harm is not a constant. So it can never be harm. It's neither a constant nor is it apparent. So what is the effective cause? Let me give the example. So the example is this. Here, if somebody comes to you with an issue and says, look, okay, I got a problem with Islam. I don't think Islam makes any sense. So why doesn't Islam make sense? Let me give you an example. Okay, so I own a property and I have a partner, okay? And I'm selling this property, I'm selling my share of the property, and my partner gets the priority to buy it. My partner is going to get priority to buy it, and he doesn't even care. He has no care at all that this property is there. But my brother, who's not a partner with me, right? He wants to buy this property. And he's my brother, he's my blood relative. Shouldn't my brother be more entitled to preemption to buy my property than this partner of mine, who I'm selling my piece to? But that doesn't seem to make any sense. So how do you explain that? What is the effective cause? The effective cause, being a partner or being a neighbor. That is the effective cause. Right? Because the partner, remember, the effective cause usually actualizes the wisdom. Right? Whereas there may be a case where someone else may say, well, that person is going to be harmed by my sale of the property. My brother really is going to be affected if I'm selling this and he doesn't get an opportunity to buy it. We say, you know what, that's an issue that you have to deal with, but this was a general rule that was built for the general benefit of the community. It doesn't apply in all circumstances. So this idea of difficulty is not a constant, but the ruling is built on the constant, which is the effective cause, which is either being a partner or being a neighbor. There's a neighbor across the street, and he says, well, I'm going to be harmed, right? Doesn't apply to him. The same thing doesn't apply to him. So, well, it bothers me, there's a church being built in there, or there's a masjid being built. The Islamophobes, what they do is, I don't want that mosque to be built in my area. You live like a mile down the street. I don't care. I don't want that mosque. I'm a resident of this place, and I don't want that mosque to be there. Whatever harm that they're going to be incurring by, looking at the minaret and it's going to bother them inside or whatever it's going to be, that harm is not taken into consideration because they're not right there next door. It's not a direct harm on them. This is what the ruling was built upon anyways, right? So it makes sense. It makes sense because the effective cause usually actualizes the wisdom behind it. Is that clear? Yeah. It's on either side, but there has to be an adjacent neighbor directly adjacent to the property. So if it's a neighbor that's a little bit further away and there's a gap between, then he doesn't get preemption. So that's something in Islamic law they explain. So it's basically, we mentioned a few examples in the previous class. Yeah, inshallah. So, not only property, it can be any type of property. Doesn't have to be only property. It can be a sale of a business. It can be sale of a factory. Yeah, it can be anything.
Based on the sale.
It's based on the sale. We covered that there's a lot of conditions, so we covered that in the previous class. No, we covered other conditions. There's more conditions. We covered all of them in the previous class. Yeah. Okay? So that's preemption. So that's another example of it. The third condition is that the effective cause must be suitable to affect the underlying wisdom behind the ruling. What's known as munasib. Right? So you have to make sure the effective cause is actually having some wisdom, meaning you know what the wisdom is and you know what the effective cause is. If the effective cause does not represent the wisdom in any way, that can't be the effective cause. Right? So let's say, for example, a hypothetical example, that we give every murderer $1,000 as a gift. Like, what the heck? The whole point of having a ruling on a murder is the wisdom of having some kind of penalty or something like that is to prevent more murder from taking place. So well, what we do is, anyone who commits murder, we're going to give them a ticket to Disneyland. And they're going to get to go and enjoy themselves. That doesn't actualize the wisdom behind what you're trying to do, and that is you're trying to protect life and stop crime from taking place. So it wouldn't work. That can never be an effective cause. So it has to be suitable. It has to be munasib to the wisdom. So remember, we said the Islamic law is either to benefit people, the rulings are there to benefit people, or to avert some type of harm away from them. Right? So the effective cause has to be suitable to making the objectives occur, such as, let's say there's a rule in Islamic law to prevent disputes between two people. You're not allowed to propose to a girl who's already, or a guy who's already engaged. Why are you not allowed to do that? Because that prevents disputes from happening. Because if you all of a sudden get in there and then all of a sudden you get married, the guy's got kicked out, you're going to have a dispute, the person's going to have some hatred in his heart against you. Easing hardships, like when you're traveling, we talked about. Averting some kind of harm. So we talked about all these things. These are some of the wisdoms or objectives behind the rulings that we've been talking about. So let's take some practical examples. Intoxicants, narcotics, drugs. Why are they prohibited? Because Islam wants to make sure that people have the ability to make reasonable decisions. And this protects the intellect so that it can make reasonable decisions and it can prevent them from making foolish decisions that will harm them, harm their family, harm other people and all of these things. DUIs and beating up their family and all of that. So what is the effective cause in prohibiting these substances? The effective cause is what? Intoxication. The ability to intoxicate is the effective cause. Right? Now, is the effective cause suitable to actualize the wisdom that we just talked about? Yes. Because if you prevent intoxication, you do prevent people from losing their rational abilities, which they would normally have. So it's a very suitable cause. It actualizes the wisdom properly. Right? Now let's say, the example that I gave you, somebody says, you know what, it's the smell of wine that makes it prohibited. That's it's the effective cause, and it just, you know how bad it just smells, and it starts rotting and all of that. That's the effective cause. Now does that, as an effective cause, is it suitable to affect the wisdom? It's not. It affects another wisdom, you don't smell bad, but that's not the wisdom behind this ruling. The wisdom behind the ruling of not drinking is not about the smell. It's about the fact that you're keeping your mind intact, right? So the smell can never be the effective cause. The color of the intoxicating substance cannot be the cause. The fact that it's a liquid, so liquidity cannot be the cause. If you say, well, it's from a fruit source, it's from grapes, or it's from something else, it cannot be the effective cause because it's not suitable. So this is a way to figure out what are not effective cause. If somebody comes and say, oh, the reason why this is prohibited is this reason. Now you know how to test it. You know how to test it and you say, well, let's see, is it apparent? No. Is it constant? No. Or let's say it's apparent? Yes. Constant? Yes. Is it suitable? No, it's not. Therefore, it cannot be an effective cause. This cannot be the underlying reason behind why it's prohibited. And this is such a big problem today because everyone tries to explain the wisdom of Islam to other people. Right? I mean, generally, a lot of Muslims try to do that. And oftentimes they have a good intention, but they don't know what the heck they're doing sometimes, and they really mess it up because they don't understand a lot of these things. So it's a very important topic. Okay, so that's one example. Second example, there's a lot of examples here. Second example, the murderer is excluded from inheriting from the estate of his victim. Right? The wisdom is to protect life and to protect inheritance from coming faster and, from greed, people who are going to be inheriting. Now, does it fulfill the purpose of protecting life that you don't get inheritance if you kill your parents? Does it stop, children who are thinking about killing their parents from killing them? Not all the time, but does it aid? Definitely, it aids that. It does help. So it is fulfilling the wisdom of trying to stop that harm from taking place. Retaliation, qisas, right? In case of murder, if you commit murder, you're going to get the death penalty. Does that affect the wisdom of the ruling, and that is to protect life? Yes, it does. When you're tough on crime, it's going to stop the crime. Does next example, cutting the hand of the thief, right, when they meet all the conditions, will it protect people's wealth, which is the wisdom behind it? It will, right? It will, because it will scare all the would-be criminals who are going to go and say, oh, I'm going to go steal something too. It's a big thing. If I get caught, right, this is a big problem, right? So this guy is not really going to think twice. Now, if the penalty is, you're going to be in jail for like a week, and then someone will bail you out, and we know you can't afford, a gym membership and stuff, but you get a nice gym over there, and all of that. Obviously, the person will be like, yeah, 1 week, I can do 1 week. It's not a big deal. It's not gonna have the same ruling or wisdom. So it does actualize it. D, next example. When you're traveling, you're excused from the Friday prayer. So when men are traveling, they don't have to pray the Friday prayer, Jummah prayer, right? What if someone is not traveling, but he's really, really busy? He has 250 emails in his account to check. Right? This was like me today. Very, very stressful. But the thing is, can you be excused from Jummah? No, you can't. So why if one person go after the other? Well, the underlying wisdom is to prevent hardship, right? Particularly for the traveler. Why for the traveler? Because he's going to have to go out of his way to find a Muslim community, or find a masjid, or find some place where they're performing Jummah. There's more difficulty usually involved. What if the guy's traveling and all of a sudden he just passes by a masjid? Right? He says, it happens to be on the road. And the other guy, his work is far away from the masjid. Still, the same thing, the effective cause is static. It's still going to apply the same way. This guy, if he doesn't stop, he doesn't stop. Should he stop? Yeah, maybe he should stop. But if he doesn't, he doesn't. So, is the effective cause suitable for preventing that type of difficulty during travel? Yes, it is. It very much is. So these are some of the things that we need to look into detail. So now the next thing we're going to talk about is how to determine what the effective cause is. So I've been telling you so far, this is the effective cause of this. This is the effective cause of this. How do you know for sure? How do you figure out that this is the illah, this is the effective cause of this ruling? How do you figure it out if you're not told it? Right? How do people figure this out in the first place? We will figure that out after our break. Inshallah. Break time. We're ready for a break? Yes, inshallah. So we'll meet back at 9:02, and we should be having tea and coffee, inshallah. So we'll meet back, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Doesn't matter. It's good practice for you.
Sheikh, I want to ask you a question about illa sexuality.
One sec. Assalamu alaikum. Are you locked out again? Okay. I'm sending somebody. Sorry. Can one of you guys open the gate? You know the gate? Yeah. But you know which one I'm talking about, right? The small one. The walking one. The walking, yeah. Next week we're not going to open it for him.
But the comment.
Just leave it because we're about to start. So you can just leave it till after class, inshallah.
That's what I was going to ask you. I actually asked you.
It's after class, inshallah. Yes. Yes, that's a very good suggestion. So we give you certain rulings. Give certain rulings as practice, and then you try to extract the illah, the effective cause, from the ruling. It's a very good suggestion. I already thought of it, and that's going to be the essay questions on the exam. These are all these examples are practice. The exact.
Something we can do in our own time.
In your own time, and you can. Okay. Okay. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Alhamdulillah. So that's it. It's once you look at this example, go back. Don't look at your notes and just write the example, the question down yourself, and then you'll try and extract everything and see if you can do it. You should be able to do it. Go back through Islamic Law 1 and forget Islamic Law 1, because acts of worship generally don't have too many of them. Go through Islamic Law 2 and try to extract all of the effective causes in all the rulings that you come across and see if you can get it right or not. Yes. But just take the notes from somebody. Have them print it out for you. Yeah, take it from somebody. I give you copyright privilege to take it from somebody. Inshallah. Okay. Yeah, I mean generally, you don't have access to Islamic Law 2. What you do is you just grab a friend who does have access and you get the notes. If you want the notes, I can send it to you. Just email me, I'll send you the notes if you want it. Inshallah. Okay? Alright, let's start. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah. So how do you determine the effective cause of a ruling? It can sometimes be very difficult, especially when it's not explicitly stated in the text. So there are certain methods which you can use. And we're going to look at some of these methods. So the first thing is, before we look at the method, what about the effective causes which are explicitly mentioned already in the text? When I say text, what am I referring to? Quran and Sunnah. Okay, Quran or Sunnah. So the first way to figure it out is when it's actually mentioned explicitly in the text, or it could be implicitly implied in the text, right? It could be implied there. So let's take an example. There's a verse in the Quran which mentions, this chapter 59, verse 7, it mentions that part of the spoils of war, what are spoils of war? That when you're in a war, everything that's left on the battlefield, everything that's captured from enemy soldiers and all of that, part of the spoils of war must go to the orphans, to the needy, and to the wayfarers. And that's specifically mentioned in the Quran. This is the rule. Okay, part of it has to go there. But the Quran doesn't stop there. It specifies why. And it says, so that wealth does not only accumulate in the hands of the rich. So the ruling behind that is to make sure that all these spoils of war is not just going to be going to the wealthy people only. It's not the rich soldiers who fight are going to be getting all the money and the poor get neglected because they didn't have an opportunity to fight, because they didn't have weapons. Because you have to have some money to be a soldier on the field, because at that time you have to have your own armor. You have to have whatever it is. So this is the underlying wisdom behind it, and it's mentioned to help you build the effective cause based upon the wisdom, because it's clearly specified, right? So, what is the effective cause in this example? Here, let me tell you again. So, the ruling is that a portion of the spoils has to go to the orphan, the needy, and the wayfarers. Orphans, needy, and wayfarers. Wayfarers are people who are like lost in another land, and they don't have, what's that service called? It's not Wells Fargo, it's, what's it called? No, the money transfer, Western Union, yeah. They don't have access to Western Union, right? So they're lost somewhere and they need some money just to get back home. That's a wayfarer, right? So these three categories of people, they're going to be getting money, and the wisdom. Now, if I give it away for you, you tell me what is the effective cause, what is the wisdom? Yeah.
The effective cause is that you ask those for and the wisdom is
Okay, so he said the effective cause is that you actually have spoils of war remaining, there. And the wisdom is so that the rich people don't hog all the spoils. You got one of them right and you got one of them wrong. Who can tell me which one was wrong? And then correct it. Yes. Was the effective cause wrong or the wisdom wrong? Effective cause was wrong. Okay, what should be the effective cause? So summarize it in one little statement. What is the effective cause of this ruling? Okay, the stuff should be distributed among these three. Very, very close, but there's a better way to express it. What is the effective cause? To be distributed upon the needy people. Okay, you don't need the distributed part. Alright, what is it? Yeah, to be among the orphans, to be among the needy, to be among the wayfarers is the effective cause. Just take the distribution part out of that sentence. Right? The fact that you're an orphan, that's the effective cause of you being able to receive some of these spoils of war shares. Because that having spoils doesn't enact the ruling itself. Because
Is it that if you have the spoils, it is that you don't have orphans? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. You could have spoils. There are no orphans, wayfarers, or anything to give it to, right? So it doesn't mention that part of it. So the ruling is you give the spoils to the people. So the question is, what is the effective cause of giving it to these people? You have to have people who fit these characters. So the fact that they're there, that's the effective cause. I mean, technically yes, but the emphasis is on the second part. Yeah, okay. The emphasis is there. So that's the effective cause. And then the wisdom is clear. And so, by the way, let's just do a quick example now. Here's a test for you. Okay. Is the effective cause apparent? Okay, what is the effective cause? They're people. You can see them. Can you tell that someone is an orphan? Is it apparent? Yeah. I mean, you investigate and you find out, oh, this person doesn't have parents. He's an orphan. It's clear. It's verifiable, right? It's verifiable. So that it's there. Is it constant? It's constant. Is it suitable? It is suitable because they're the ones generally who are in need, right? So all of them work. Okay, so it's the effective cause. So that's an example where Allah already specified for us. He made it clear. This is the reason, this is the underlying wisdom. There's another example, the prophetic report, hadith. The Prophet, this is an interesting story. So the Prophet, peace be upon him, he caught a man peeping through a hole in his own house. Prophet's in his house, someone is looking through one of the little holes and watching him. And he was combing his hair and getting ready and stuff. And the guy is sitting there staring at him. So the Prophet saw him. And this guy's there staring through the little crack, in his house. So then the Prophet, he rebuked the man. He got upset at the man. And he said something else about, what? I would have maybe poked your eye, so just to give you a lesson. But he said, an important statement, permission is required due to what the eye might see. Now, what is permission is required? What did he mean by permission is required? What he meant was, you all know that the Islamic ruling, that permission is required before you enter a house. That's in the Quran. The ruling is there. The Muslims knew that. This guy's a Muslim, he knew that. So the Prophet now is clarifying. The reason why permission is required before you enter somebody's house, you knock, if the door is open, you don't just walk in. You ask for permission before entering by knocking or ringing a bell or whatever it is. And the reason for it is due to what the eye might see. So he specifically gave us the thing. What if someone says, oh, permission, there's no wisdom behind it. It's just good characteristic to ask. And this is really important when you teach your children like manners and morals and ethics and adab and everything. Instead of just giving it to them, there's wisdoms behind it. You can explain to them. Look, we ask because if we don't knock, if the door is open, it's not only is it not nice, there's more of a reason. The reason is we might see something that they don't want us to see. And we wouldn't want someone else to look at us and just walk in. Therefore, we shouldn't be doing the same thing. So the Prophet, anyways, he clarified explicitly in his statement the exact reason of what it is. Right? So the effective cause of being allowed to enter a house, right, or to peep through one of its windows, if you were going to do that, is the permission of the resident. Now, technically, this may not be the best wording. Permission actually is not the best effective cause. But the permission needs to be some type of verbal permission or knocking. Knocking would be the effective cause. For example, ringing the doorbell would be the effective cause. And the underlying wisdom is so that you don't see something and it's represented through permission, right? By the person who's residing inside the house. Okay? And the underlying wisdom is to prevent people from seeing something which is private.
Asking my permission. You not get just walking today.
You're right. So yeah, so this is okay. Then this is correct. Yeah, you're right. So clarification was, you can't just knock. You have to receive the permission from the person. So the permission is the effective cause. Yes, good. I'm glad. I don't have to change these notes. Permission meaning receiving permission from the person. Yeah. Because it's seeking permission, you have to receive it. Let's say you don't even ask for it, but you receive it anyways. That can be the effective cause. So receiving permission to enter is the effective cause in this case. And the wisdom is to prevent the seeing something which is private. And there could be more than one wisdom. Right? There are other wisdoms, but this is one of the main ones. So this means the effective cause, or at least the wisdom, was explicitly mentioned in the text so that you can figure out exactly what the effective cause is easily. Now, there are some times where the effective cause is not explicitly mentioned, but it's implied in the hadith, and it's very clear that it's implied. It's not difficult to figure out. We use this in our own daily language all the time, right? So, for example, let's just take these examples. Or let's take a practical example from daily life. So when I tell someone, make sure to sharpen your pencil. This is an old example, right? No one sharpens pencils. Make sure to sharpen your pencil before coming to class. Did I tell you why you should sharpen your pencil? What the wisdom behind sharpening your pencil is? No. But a pencil is there to write. The pencil being sharp is going to help it to be able to write properly, right? So it's implicit in my statement that the reason for sharpening your pencil is so that you can write properly. I don't have to spell it out for you. So this is what's known as implicit. Yeah.
Another reason could be for you to prevent from getting up in the middle of the class.
Or that can be a side reason. Prevent people from getting up, disturbing the class or something like that. But the main reason would be, I want you to write properly as well, and then there could be other reasons as well on top of that, right? So you can figure out what the effective cause is. If I'm in a circumstance where I'm talking about disturbances in class, and then I say, sharpen your pencil before coming, drink your drink before coming, then you can figure out what the reason behind it is. Right? So it's implicit. So let's take an example. The Prophet forbade the murderer to inherit. He said, "La yarithul qatil." The murderer does not inherit. That's it. You see, the murderer does not inherit. That he didn't say why. Somebody says, "It just doesn't make sense. I can't figure it out." It's implicit right there. The fact that the person is a murderer, right, and the fact that the inheritance is coming to, it's pretty clear. There's no other, real example you can think of why another effective cause would be there. So it's implicit in the statement that the murder itself is the effective cause of not inheriting from that person. Likewise, another statement of the Prophet, he said, "A wise person does not judge between two parties while he is angry." So without looking at the text, what is the effective cause? What is it? I heard wise person and I heard anger. What is the effective cause? Anger. It's anger. Okay? Because here's the thing, he's not supposed to be a judge. In what state is he prevented from being a judge? It's a state of anger, right? It's a state of anger, and that shows his wisdom, and it's going to represent and manifest in a wise judgment. That's going to be the wisdom behind the ruling. So the effective cause is anger itself, okay? So this is when it's explicitly mentioned or implicitly mentioned. What if it's not mentioned in the text at all? Right? You see, the word murderer and the word angry was mentioned in the text. Even though it's not explicit, it's still there in the text. What if it's not there in the text at all? Then you have some methods which you use. And this is known as searching for a cause. It's known as as-sabr wa taqsim. Sabr, not with a sad. So it does not mean patience. Okay? Although you have to have patience sometimes when you're searching. Sabr means like you're sifting through things, but taqsim is like you're categorizing them. Okay? So searching for the cause. So there's this whole process is known as this. So there's a method to determine what the effective cause is when it's not specifically mentioned in the text. So when it's not mentioned in the text, what you need to do is you need to extract what the effective cause is, and this is a technical term known as takhrij al-manat. Anyone remember what al-manat means? It's almost synonymous with illah. Right? It's what the illah is built on is known as the manat. Right? So now your takhrij al-manat means you're trying to extract the effective cause from the text that you're looking at, although it's not mentioned. So let's take an example. Wine is prohibited in the Quran. We've been using this example so many times. Wine is prohibited in the Quran. Does Allah specifically spell out that you should not be drinking because it impairs your intellect and leads to this harm? It's not spelled out. It's not there. Right? Even the wording it's not even implicit either technically. It's not implicit because that wording is not present in the text itself. Right? So now when you look at that and you say, well, how can we figure out what the effective cause is? There must be a way to figure out, extract it somehow, even though it's not mentioned. Right? So now what do? You analyze every single quality of the wine in detail. So let's take a look at the qualities. It's made from grapes. It's a liquid. It has a specific taste. It has a distinct odor. And it can cause intoxication. Now without going into details, obviously the only suitable one is it can cause intoxication. None of these other things can possibly be it. If somebody argues that it has a fermented taste, right, any other drink that has a fermented taste would be a problem. So we brought this example already. And that would not actualize the wisdom. This is what's known as takhrij al-manat when you don't have it mentioned specifically. Okay? Now what do you do when it is mentioned in the text, but there could be more than one possibility and you can't figure out which one it is. Let's say there are 5 characteristics and 2 or 3 of them look like it could be the potential effective cause, but you don't know exactly which one. All 3 of them or 2 of them, they meet the criteria. But you say, is it this one or is it this one? I can't figure out which one it is. Then you use a process known as isolating the effective cause. What's known as tanqih al-manat. Okay? So you isolate, figure out what is the real effective cause in this case, and you discard the rest of them. So there is a prophetic report, a hadith, where a Bedouin man came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and he confessed that, "O Messenger of Allah, I have had intercourse with my wife, intentionally, in the month of Ramadan while I was fasting." And he was very, sad for what he did. You're not allowed to do this. So he was really, really sad for what he did. So the Prophet told him, you need to make an expiation. You need to make kafara, which is, you have to pay like a type of penalty in order to, for what you've done, for the sin that you've done. Now we have to figure out what is the effective cause of making the kafara when you do something like, when do you expiate? When you do something like this in Ramadan. So let's look at all the characteristics in detail. Okay? Number 1, the man was a Bedouin. Okay? The man was living in Arabia. The man slept with his wife. Not with somebody else, with his own wife. Right? It was in the month of Ramadan. The man was fasting, etc., etc. These are all the things. Now what this is going to do when you list them all out in detail, it's going to make you understand, it's going to help you understand all these other aspects of the equation. Let's say some guy comes up and says, you know what, I don't take this hadith, the way that you understand it, because this was for Bedouins only, right? Therefore this doesn't apply. Why do you guys apply to, the man was a Bedouin, it says in the hadith that he was a Bedouin, and Bedouins are very rough people and all that. That's why the Prophet gave him such a harsh punishment. You got to make this kafara or something like that. Someone comes and make that argument. They've miscalculated the effective cause, and therefore their analogy is with a discrepancy. Right. It wasn't in the notes? Was analogy with the okay, let me save my page. I'm on 63. Okay, let's go back a little. Okay, must be. Yep, number 5, under conditions for analogy. What's that? The effective cause must apply in exactly the same way. Next sentence, high energy drink, being drunk, argument will not apply because analogy with the discrepancy, qiyas ma'al fariq. Oh, no, it's not in the slide, it's in the notes. It may not be in the slides. Okay. So it's there in the notes though. So let's see. Where was I? Okay, tanqih al-manat, right? So the Bedouin comes, okay? Now we want to answer certain questions. So the Bedouin, does this apply to non-Bedouins? Generally, because it wouldn't be suitable, right? It wouldn't make sense anyways. That's pretty clear. What if the man slept with his girlfriend instead of his wife? Would it apply or not apply? Generally, we'd say it apply. Okay. What if the man is gay and he slept with his partner? This is a question that people are going to start asking nowadays, right? It'll still apply. It'll still apply, right? What if he's transgender and he sleeps with a man? It still applies, right? Okay. See, the fact that he slept with someone. Okay. Okay, that's okay. Here's a question. This is actually a contemporary issue that scholars discuss and debate. Would masturbation also require the same type of expiation? Or would it be a different ruling? What did we learn in Islamic Law 101? Does anyone remember? It's different. So we said it's not going to be the same. But this is a dispute among scholars. Anyways, so that's what we're taking for now. What if, does fasting outside the month of Ramadan require an expiation as well? That's a very good question. So let's say you're not in Ramadan, but you're fasting on a Monday, or you're fasting where you promised Allah, I'm going to fast tomorrow. And you're fasting, and then you do the exact same thing, you sleep with your wife. Expiation or no? You're saying no. Okay, so this defining what the effective cause will help us to answer this question, right? So someone's saying the same, someone's saying no. Right. Oh, okay. So it's you see how this is leading to a difference. That's why it's a very important process. Okay, before we answer it, okay, is the expiation limited to intercourse or anyone who breaks their fast by eating? Is this, because it mentioned intercourse, right? What if you just eat a In-N-Out burger, right? Grilled cheeseburger, right? Sorry guys. Alright, yeah, then what? It's a question. It's a question, right? Does it count, or do you have to make it up or not? Alright, so now scholars differ in reality, okay? On some of these points. On the Bedouin point, there's no difference, right? On the in Ramadan. So here's the thing. So scholars differ particularly on this point. This is a major point, because people, when they break their fast intentionally, if you can't free a slave, you gotta fast for 2 months straight. So people who did that and they fasted, they say, you know what, it's too hard for me today, I'm just gonna go ahead and eat something. That's 2 months penalty. Does it count or does it not count? So the scholars differ. The Shafi'i and the Hanbali school, they said that only intercourse will require kafara, expiation. And the Hanafi and the Maliki schools, they said, no, you're violating the sanctity of the month of Ramadan. And if you eat, or you drink, or or you do intercourse, same thing, you broke your fast in Ramadan, you're going to have to expiate for that. The Maliki and Hanafi schools, right? So on this one, who's going with the Maliki and the Hanafi schools on this one? Okay. No, don't worry about the reasons, inshallah. I trust your reasons. Who's going with the Shafi'i and Hanbali schools? Okay. Tell me your reasons real quick. Yes.
The woman, she's not allowed to fast, volunteer without her husband permission.
Mm-hmm.
In case her husband needs her during the day or something.
Ah, okay.
And the Prophet said that if you were visiting a friend when you fasting volunteer, when he asked you to break your fast, you break your fast. It means not the general rule applies the same as Ramadan too. Okay.
Who went with the Shafi'i school just because it's easier on them? That was the reason?
It's something like kind of related to that.
Okay.
It's more along the lines like kind of like not watch violence in movies.
Okay. So he made analogy with violence in movies and not making a kafara. Okay. Keep studying this in detail, and you might change your mind. Yes. Yeah, it's there's people. They're both correct. They're both good opinions. It depends which school of thought you apply yourself to. Which means either sometimes you associate yourself with the school of thought, but sometimes you look at it and you say, I think this kind of clicks with me a little bit. It just seems to make more sense. So that's a whole other question. That's Islamic Law 101. We talked about that, actually, if you keep switching between schools or not. But the reality is, whenever I encounter this, I have a whole group of people who ask me this question. And when I explain this to them, we're going with the Shafi'i school or the Hanbali school. Why? The reason is very clear-cut. So I don't have to fast for 2 months in a row. So anyways. Shafi'i, they say, yeah. So you just change over, huh? Alhamdulillah, yeah, it's the easier one.
What's your opinion?
My opinion on this one is with Maliki and Hanafi schools. And the reason is because the way that I view things is that I believe that there's a wisdom in every single law in Islam, and oftentimes the wisdom is manifest if we look properly. And the wisdom is what do you say? It's consistent. It's consistent. And I think the wisdom would not be as consistent if it was limited to only intercourse and it was not going to have the same expiation for the other thing. That's really my way of thinking. Anyways, so that's trying to figure out what the effective cause is. Now that you've got the effective cause, now what? Right? Now you have to verify the existence of the cause in the new case. We've been talking this whole time about the original case, the asl. Now we have to check the fara, or the new case, and we have to see, is it really there or not? And this is the subject of all contemporary fiqh debates. All the major fiqh debates that you're going to find, it's this. And you hear scholars all the time talking about tahqiq al-manat, tahqiq al-manat. This is exactly what it is. So let's take an example, or let's look at. So once you got the effective cause in the original case, you have to ascertain whether or not it is in the new case properly or not. So you investigate the attributes of the new case properly. And you see, okay, let's take an example. Someone just asked me this example last week. Actually, Sister Sarah, our previous TA for the class. She said, there's this new type of tea, I forgot what it's called. It's some kind of herbal tea, which is supposed to have very good therapeutic effects, like some kind of Chinese tea or something, but it's fermented tea, right? And she said, are we allowed to drink this or we're not allowed to drink this? So obviously you have to research it. So I started researching it and seeing what kind of level of fermentation and this and that. And I said, look, there's so many different ways to prepare this tea in different countries, different parts of the world. So you can't give a blanket statement that this tea is okay or this tea is not okay. You have to look at how this tea is being prepared. Does the effective cause of intoxication, the ability to intoxicate, does it apply to this type of drink or not? It has to be tested. You have to kind of figure out some way to measure, does the effective cause, the illah of intoxication, based on analogy with wine, does it apply in this tea or does it not apply in this tea? Right? So we have to figure that out before we can before we can make a declaration where that tea is okay or that tea is not okay. This is known as tahqiq al-manat. I'll give you another example. There is something called chocolate liquor in a lot of chocolates. Liqueur, right? Does that have the ability to intoxicate? No, it doesn't. Now, there are chocolates, right, that have brandy inside of them. Okay? I was in Belgium, which is known for its chocolates, and they have this in some of those chocolate, places. And I had some friends who, alhamdulillah, they accepted Islam. 3 guys, they're all Belgians, and they accepted Islam. And I was asking them, I said, you know what, when you were not Muslim, did you ever try this? They said, yeah, we tried it. I said, in fact, I don't know if I mentioned this example already in this class. No, I didn't. They said, we used to, when we were kids, we used to get a lot of these chocolates. Because you eat enough of them, you start getting like a buzz. You start getting a little bit intoxicated. And you're allowed to eat them even though you're like, teenage, little kid or something like that. So I said, so it can intoxicate. They said, definitely. I was thinking in my mind, I'm like, this can't intoxicate you. And they're telling me, trust me, we have experience, it can. So, they have rum, rum in there. They have rum or they have some other type of thing in there. So a scholar can easily make a mistake if they're not properly applying this tahqiq al-manat or verifying the existence of the effective cause in the new case. So they may think that, well, if this has some of this, this has some of this, so it has the ability to intoxicate, it has the ability to intoxicate. You have to be very careful. So, same thing with the fermented tea. You have to test it, you have to see, can it really intoxicate? What type of preparation will make it intoxicate? What type of preparation will not make it intoxicate before making any type of ruling? So it needs to be tested and to see whether it has the effective cause in the same way or in a similar way that the first one had. Another example. So a thief steals your credit card online, starts buying stuff, and we catch him, and there's an Islamic State, for example, do we cut off his hand or no? Okay, so what we do is, we go back to Islamic Law 102, and we look at the conditions for cutting off the hand in cases of theft. And some of the conditions were mentioned. I'm not going to go into details. You look at the conditions, you go back, you say, do these conditions apply in the same way, same type of effective cause, or effective causes, or conditions that are there, apply to this type of theft? Does it apply or does it not apply? What if you made a link, like an email link or something, you click on this and all of a sudden, boom, it gets your, let's say it doesn't get your credit card. You type your number in there, he didn't steal it, you type your number in there because you're foolish, and he made it look like you're buying something, and then he got your credit card number. And he sells your credit card number to somebody else, right? Like what happened with Target on Black Friday, stole all these credit card numbers, and what did they do? This guy is not going to use that many credit cards. He's going to sell these numbers to, I don't know, some guy in Russia or wherever it is, right? For something. So in that case, does he classify as a similar to a thief? Or if we catch him, we're going to cut off his hand. What about these Wall Street, bankers and when we caught them, right? Do they get their hand cut off or they don't? So you have to figure out, do the conditions of, because not every theft gets a hand cut. We studied that. So do the conditions here meet up with the conditions here? Right. So that's an issue in contemporary Islamic, contemporary fiqh by scholars. That's one example. Another example, which I think is the most talked about example, is, does an economic transaction which has a ton of conditions and stipulations built into the contract, right? Like let's take an example. There's a contract that is a delayed payment cost plus transaction. So we talked about cost plus transactions, murabaha, right? When you sell out your cost and you say, I'm selling it to you 5% over my cost, and I'm declaring what my cost is. We talked about why that is and everything, but it's delayed payment. So now you don't need to pay me now, you can pay me later. And depending on the amount of time you want, I'm going to give you 3 options. You pay me in 10 years, you pay me in 20 years, you pay me in 30 years. Depending on the amount of time, I have different prices for my cost plus murabaha transaction. Does that type of transaction, is it analogous to a usurious riba transaction or not? So this is the way that most of Islamic finance around the world is set up. It's exactly this, right? So the question is, tahqiq al-manat. Does this apply or doesn't apply? And every single Islamic bank or Islamic financial institution, they have their own contract. And the contract is written in different ways. Even if it's the same type of transaction they're telling you, it's written in different ways. That's why a scholar needs to do what? They need to study every individual contract. In order to do what? Tahqiq al-manat. To figure out whether the effective cause of interest or any other prohibited transaction really exists in this contract or it doesn't. And if they modify the contract next month, so their lawyers come in to the Islamic bank and they change the contract a little bit, you have to do it again. Because they might have added something or subtracted something where now it doesn't apply or it does apply. So it's interesting because I'm actually flying out to Dallas, this is why our class will be cancelled in 2 weeks. So there's an AMJA conference in Dallas, American Muslim Jurist Association. It's basically scholars from around the country. We're going to be meeting, there's an entire conference, a whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, on this topic, particularly of Islamic finance, of buying a home only. And the whole conference is just about this. People are going to be presenting their papers. There's going to be debate going on. All the Islamic financial institutions are going to be there. So we're going to debate it among the scholars, and then we go outside to their tables, and we debate it with them. Very nice, very interesting weekend for me. What's that? Yeah, there's many different models. The murabaha is just one model. There's that model, and then there's rent-to-own model, and then there's diminishing musharaka, diminishing partnership model, and there's other models. There's actually 6 types of models that are used in Islamic finance. So this is one of them. So the question is, does it or does it not? So that's the question, which hopefully, if we can, we'll cover in the next Islamic law class, contemporary issues. We get time, but it's a really huge topic. So this is a very, very important subject, especially on contemporary issues. Like another example, tahqiq al-manat would be, can you unplug people from a life support system? A big issue, right? Huge issue. Now, what if they have 100% brain death, but all the organs are intact? What if they have 70% brain death, 50% brain death? Is it majority brain death or not majority brain death, or do you have to keep them hooked to a system? These are all aspects of where tahqiq al-manat really needs to apply. You have to figure out, so it's not just, oh, well, you know what? Oh, I studied 20 years, 10 years in this country, 5 years in that country, 5 years in that country. I come back, I'm the super scholar now. You ask me any questions. All right. If that guy doesn't know how to do tahqiq al-manat, doesn't know, he's not a scholar. He doesn't know what he's doing, because you can't give an answer until you figure out whether the effective cause is in there or it's not in there. If you don't understand contemporary transactions, you don't understand what brain death, the difference between death and brain death and organ death and cell death, if you don't understand the difference between that, you can never make a ruling. Somebody goes, but no, I have the entire Bukhari and Muslim and Tirmidhi memorized. I've memorized all the books. I've read all the books of tafsir. The guy still can't answer the question because he doesn't know how to do this. So anyways, very, very important subject, but it's an advanced subject, so it's beyond the scope of this class. But you at least understand what it is now. No, I'm not calling you dumb. See, this is really advanced subject, right? So anyways, you get the point though. You get how it works, right? So, what are the types? Okay, it's 9:45, so what we'll do, we'll stop for questions, and then we'll conclude for today. Yes?
Just rewinding just a moment on the ruling for and let people get angry, right? If I remember correctly, you said anger is the effective cause for that ruling.
Yes. Anger was the effective cause for judging between two people.
Thanks.
Question about the notorious whining people living in okay, so the emperor was going to be intoxicated. Was harming the body ever considered in that as well?
Good question. So in wine, the effective cause we've been talking is intoxication. So was harming the body part of the effective cause or no? And the answer is no. Was it part of the wisdom or no? And the answer is the effective cause is not built on directly affecting the body, right? But harming the body comes from another ruling in another case, which you can apply analogy to. Do not kill yourself, the poison, all of these. So many other examples, but wine specifically is not the case. So let's say wine does not harm your body. It does not mess up your liver. It does not decrease your age. In fact, they find out that people who drink and get drunk on a regular basis, they live 10 years longer. Their life expectancy goes up 10 years. Let's assume that's the case. Wine still remains prohibited because of the intoxicating effect where your intellect goes away. So it's very important to, so you will start arguing with someone and they come to you with, look, medical science has shown that this, red wine is good for your blah, 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 blah. What's that? And marijuana is very good for that, and opium is good for that, and cocaine is good for that, and it helps regulate your metabolism, and you lose weight, and you become healthier or something. Whatever all that stuff is, you take speed, right? You take speed, and you can work out better in the gym. So you're going to be more healthy, you're going to live a longer life, you're less likely to have a heart attack. And you can lose weight. Absolutely. One of my computer science professors, he used to encourage us, crazy guy, used to encourage us, Dr. Klefstad, in case the UC system wants to get him, he used to encourage us to go and take ephedrine, right? And he says almost like not pseudo-ephedrine, ephedrine. He used to tell us the stores, where to buy it, how we should take speed, and we should go do some programming and then go to the gym. I'm like, this guy's telling us to take drugs. It's really good for you. So anyway, That guy was a crackpot anyways. But you understand, it's very important to identify the effective cause properly. He's probably like a major researcher or something nowadays at UC. Anyways, yeah.
Is there another way to describe effective cause? If you describe it in another set of words.
Yeah, let me think. So the illah, or is the underlying cause. It's the underlying reason. The underlying it's not the underlying reason. It's the
Are you like having a hard time understanding the concept of divine anger?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The reason I asked about the anger thing is to help me understand. So there's a situation that needs a decision, a ruling decision. Okay. So these two guys are fighting, and then someone is invited to come and judge between them. But he's angry because it's his brother and it's us cousin.
I'll tell you, the best way to remember effective cause is the red light example. For me, that's the easiest way to understand it, right? The red light, the light itself is the effective cause in the sense that the red light is the rule. Let's say that. The red light is the rule, but the wisdom is danger. That's the difference between the two.
I understand that completely.
Okay.
But in my mind, the words effective cause don't reflect
I-
what you're actually saying.
I see.
See what I
I
mean?
see. Yeah.
I understand the examples.
Yeah, I only read one translation. And that's what they used. It's not the best translation. I couldn't think of anything else. I didn't really sit down and think about it, to be honest with you. I just threw it in there. Some terms I sit there and I think about and I say, you know what would be a really good term? I just didn't spend enough time on this. When I'm driving home or something, I'll start thinking about it, inshallah.
Examples are-
Yeah. Alhamdulillah. Okay, inshallah. I'll think. If anyone has some terms, email them to me. And I'll start sifting through them, inshallah. I'm not primary reason. Just email them to me and I'll think about them, inshallah. Yeah.
It will be more of an initiating cause, because this.
Maybe an initiating cause. Yeah. No, that's not a bad one. That might make sense. An initiating cause, or maybe not initiating, but binding cause.
Something already happened, you're trying to figure out how to rule on it.
Yeah.
So that's
Everyone, that's your homework. Think about it. Think of some suggestions and you send them to me. Email them to me. We'll come up with a brand new term, because I don't think anyone has come up with anything else. So we'll come up with a new term and we'll redefine academia with a brand new term, inshallah. Someone wrote a really good book, Dr. Ismail Faruqi. It's called Islamic English. And it was this was like in the 90s, really ahead of his time. I don't like the terms that he used, but the idea of having a book which takes all these Arabic terms and has good English translations for them. Beautiful idea. No one has really attempted to do it since then. So I had the intention to do it when I was in France, and obviously that has not materialized yet. Yeah. But it's a great idea. It's a beautiful idea. Huh? No, alhamdulillah. There's still a lot of work to be done, alhamdulillah. What's that? See, no, because the purpose of the ruling can easily be confused with the wisdom. So you have to use a term that's going to differentiate between the two of them. And to make matters even worse, when we get to later on in another chapter, there's something called sabab. And sabab is different from illah, and you have to figure out the slight difference between the two. You have to look at all the technical terms and figure out precisely what to use. So it's a tough one. We'll think about it, inshallah. Any other questions? Any questions from online students? Let's see. Nope. Okay. Rick. The illah? No, not in this case. No, not yeah. Illah can also mean defect, but not in this context. Yeah, but not. It's remember, one word can have so many different meanings. We have to make sure we're specifying the meaning that is there. Yeah. It could be, yeah, it is reason. That's what the word illa actually means, but we have to be more specific. Yeah. But see, see the thing, we're going to learn that sabab is different. Yeah. Like a binding I mean, we'll think of something, inshallah. طيب? Okay, so we'll see you all. We have class next week or no? Yeah, next week, inshallah. All right. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نستغفرك اللهم ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم.
Get money.